Welcome to the Cami Podcast, a journey toward conscious leadership. I'm Isabel Churchill, and I'm here to explore what it means to lead with purpose and integrity. Inspired by Kami, the Japanese idea of the spirit within everything, we'll uncover how to lead from your true self in business and life. Welcome to the Cami Podcast. My name is Isabel S. Churchill. I'm here to assist you through this beautiful journey around leadership. Well, first, this is technically the second episode, but I feel like it's really the first one. The previous episode was really an intro to this podcast. Today, I want to dive a little bit deeper about who I am because I think that my story is not unique. I think you'll find yourself into it. And I think I will be able to bring some perspective of why I'm hosting this podcast. Well, first, you might be noticing that I do have an accent. A lot of people get hooked on that idea. So let's clear that right now. Yes, I do have an accent. I'm a French Canadian. I grew up in New Brunswick, New Brunswick being the province east of Maine. And this province is what we call bilingual in Canada, which means that it's a province where the government has to operate in French and English. So I grew up in this tiny village, fisherman village in New Brunswick of around 800 people. This place, you can live your whole life just speaking French. And I was born in a family where love was very present, but beyond that, it was a lot about being yourself. I was always accepted to who I am, and my parents always supported us in whatever we decided to do. So the accent you can hear is French. But I am Canadian, but I'm also American. In 2016, I moved to the US and became a citizen a few years ago. I now live in Texas, so I am a little bit out of the ordinary, you would say. I have moved a lot in my life, and I'll explain to you a little bit more. It'll make more sense eventually. But my first career was in psychology. So I went to university, did an undergrad in psychology, a master in counseling, and became a counselor registered and still licensed with the Canadian Counseling Association. And this is in Canada. So I did have my own therapy clinic. I did psychotherapy for a while, but I always work for government through those years. So when I left university, I got this job on a military post in Canada, in Gagetown, New Brunswick, which is used to be anyway, a huge training post for soldiers, for Canadian soldiers. And I was there as a counselor, but it was mostly for employment coordination, because my master was in personal and career counseling. So I assisted families. I did some support work as well because through the years I was there, Canada was in Afghanistan, and one day we lost a lot of soldiers from our post. So we were kind of asked to assist families. It was a very difficult time. And the reason why I'm sharing this is through that time, I gave so much to other people that at the end of the year, I hit a plateau where I had a depression. I was diagnosed with seasonal depression then, told that I would be on medication my whole life and blah, blah, blah. So I'm not the kind of person that accept diagnosis, just so you know. I'm a very stubborn person, which probably talks a little bit about my leadership abilities. So that kind of gave me fire under me to decide that no, nobody's going to decide my future other than myself. So I left this job and went to work for a private company. I'm trying to think the order. Everything becomes so blur. But I did work in the prison system. I was with the federal government for federal offenders. I was assisting them to reintegrate community. I work as a private consultant for medical tourism company where I did statistics and analysis. And I also work for the government of New Brunswick in the wellness area as a wellness expert on positive psychology, where I introduced a lot of the work around mental fitness and resilience. Did that for years, loved it. It was a really great job. But I went to HR then for opportunities. I worked for HR and government for a while, and then I can't remember if it was coordinator or director, but it was for the whole province of New Brunswick, where I was in charge of community health coach. So I was in charge of the program for health coaches in New Brunswick for a while. That's when I met my current husband. I say current because I once had a first husband and got divorced. That was a very difficult time in my life, a very difficult transition. Eventually met my husband, who is an American military soldier. So that would explain why I travel so much, why I am moving constantly, why we have different homes across the US. All that to say that this process really taught me that I was not I was not well. When I had my first marriage, I was another person that I am today. And when we divorced, a lot of things shifted for me. So this all happened in 2014. It all unfolded. 2014 is a very significant year for me because a lot of things shifted. And I want to talk about that because we're talking about leadership here, but we're also talking about who we are. And for me, you cannot put both in compartments. It works together until you find a way to combine yourself, who you truly are, what have built who you are, and your leadership. You're not going to be comfortable in your leadership role. You're not going to be happy in your leadership role. So in 2014, I was going through a lot and starting to realize that when you face adversity, when you face challenges, which I have faced a lot in my life, I admit I'm a very resilient person, you just start assessing everything, like evaluating your life. Like, am I happy here? Am I happy in what I do? Is that really what I want to do my whole life? So I did switch job. I went from government to an association, Diabetes Canada, in terms of career. And I don't know, I felt it was more of the same. I felt like I could not be myself. And I remember when I worked for government, I was told very early that I had to slow down because other people look bad. And that always frustrated me because it's like you're telling me that I'm competent, I'm doing everything, and yet you're saying that I should be different because other people feel insecure because I am confident in my job. So I always had a challenge with that. I really thrive in the private sector because I could do my own hours. I was very producing a lot, but I lost that job because the private sector is really dependent of contract, and we lost a big contract, so they had to fire everyone. So that's when I went back to the government and worked for the provincial government. But I realized as my work with the government that I was not appreciated for who I am, for what I did as a leader. And my director at that time was a horrible person. I don't think she did it consciously, but she was just taking over credit of her team. She was the type of leader that really, like the divide and conquer really applied for her because she was never working as a team player. And I hated it. And I just left because of that. It's the kind of situation where you dream of saying, like, I'm leaving. to your boss, you know? So when I did find another job, I was very excited to tell her I was leaving. And that was in HR. And in HR, I had amazing experience in learning leadership. At that time, we talked a lot about Simon Sinek. We talked a lot about servant leadership, a lot of trend around the different leadership abilities, and also it was really important for us to develop a way to keep the expertise within. So when people would retire, we would have this transition of a plan where the person who retired is paired with a new leader or future leader. So we developed this program, and kudos to my colleague Patricia. She created this amazing program where we would build future leaders. So we were very proactive in giving training to anyone in the department, the capacity to be trained as a future leader. It didn't really ensure promotion as a leader, but it gave this opportunity to gain the skills. So I dived a lot into leadership in those years. And having also the behavioral background, so one of my expertise was around motivation. I designed this program where we would answer the psychological, the basic needs of people in the organization. So for me, I was quite equipped with the behavioral aspects. So it was just a matter of understanding leadership and how it worked. And I'm sharing all this just to tell you that at that point in time, my psyche is like, oh, wait a minute. I'm not really applying those things to my life. The three basic needs is based on the theory of determination by DC and Ryan, where they say that your psychological health is determined by those basic needs. We call it the CAR model, which is competence, autonomy, and relatedness. And without those needs being met, you're not going to be fully feel fulfilled in your work or in your life, etc. So I was starting to realize I was not fulfilled. I met my husband and then I moved to the US, got my visa as a project manager for a hospital. Again, shout out to Jordan. Thank you for believing in my skills because I wouldn't be here if it wasn't of him approving my visa and allowing me to thrive in an environment that I kind of knew as a private consultant before, but the healthcare was always something that was kind of like a third party for me. So working for wellness, I always work with different companies, working health, tourism, etc. But I never worked physically directly in a hospital. So that gave me a lot of experience. If you want to see an environment where people have lost themselves, go to a hospital because I used to work with those nurses that would do everything for their people, but yet they wouldn't eat lunch, they wouldn't go to the bathroom, they would do shift of 10 hours without going to the bathroom or eating anything. And I was like, how can you survive? Like they were definitely dedicated. And that's beautiful, but that's not healthy. It's not sane. So for me, working in that environment, a hospital is supposed to be a place of rest, a place of rejuvenation, like where you heal. Seeing all those individuals not taking care of their own health really made me question our whole society. And it kind of threw me in a space of what am I doing here? I'm not contributing to anyone's health. I'm not contributing to anyone's good. And it's actually to my own detriment because when you work in a work environment where it is encouraged to forget who you are in order to take care of others, to ignore your own needs in order to meet the needs of others, and not just that, that hospital was so my work was all around performance. I was a project manager and technically it was mostly engineers in that position. where they were doing what we call performance improvement. So it was all about measuring, and every morning we would have a whole hospital meeting where we would share how many patients in the room, how many beds available, like doing all those different statistics and numbers. And this, to me, it was showing that, okay, this is what's important to this culture. It's not about taking care of yourself. It's not about your own needs. It's about performing. And it works in certain environment. Performance is important. I'm not ignoring that fact. But performance is not sustainable if you're not taking care of yourself, if you're not allowing your employees to have their basic psychological needs met. And we see it. If you work in a hospital environment or in the healthcare environment, you know our employees are exhausted. They're falling off like little flies that are just done. They're just done. They've contributed so much, too much, that they're not well anymore. And that is why we probably are going to have a lot of lack in our healthcare system. That's why you have to wait so long to see your physician. We have burned them out in different ways in different areas, but it's all in the name of performance, all in the name of profit, all in the name of gains for the wrong people. To me, it positioned me in a really weird spot. And I'm addressing this today because I know you're out there. I know you're feeling the same way. I know you're the one working in that hospital, or you're the one just being exhausted because you've contributed so much to your work. I know. I've been there. And I told myself one day that I would never go back there. It happened really drastically. When you are unhappy at your work, you're automatically unhappy at home, right? It automatically affects your personal life. Either you become depressed, either you become cynical, whatever happens is just, it's not good. You cannot maintain happiness at home if you're not happy at work. And that's my point. Like you have to be yourself and you cannot compartmentalize things. To a certain extent you can, but it will always trickle down to the other aspects of your life. At that point in time, we've been together, my husband and I, for a while. We got married that year. So in 2018, we got married in May because we had some plans. And in order, as a military partner, in order to be capable of moving with them, having all the different benefits of the military, you have to be married. So it was never my goal to remarry, but I did for different aspects. Of course, love is there, but it was not necessary for me to get married for love because of my past experience, of course. But we got married in May, and the relationship was not going super well. And we came to a point where I was like, you know what? Like, something has to give. Like he was a recruiter for the military, for the army, and shout out to the spouse to recruiters or to recruiters yourself. This is a tough job. Being a military recruiter, you face adversity all the time. People are have their own belief systems, so they will look at you with a stink eye. They will avoid you, especially where we were. It was a very necessarily supportive of the army. And they were always terrified if my husband showed up in school, which is their duty to show up in school and try to recruit new students to the army. That's their job. It's part of their criteria. They're not there to steal your child. And honestly, I see a lot of people that have had tremendous success in their life because of their military life, including my husband. It was just getting really hard. It was a political time that was difficult, very challenging perspective. So he was constantly being harassed by people. That's how I saw it. Came a point in time where I was like, something has to give. I hate my job, you hate your job. Like, let's go somewhere. And he was attached to the National Guard, active duty National Guard of Maine. But there was opportunities at the national level. So he applied and he got a job. We found out, I think, around September. And I was so done with my job. I had to give 3-month notice. I was like, I don't know what's next, but I'm just gonna give my resignation. So I gave my resignation in October to be out January 1st of 2019. It all fell in place. My life started from there. And that will be for our next episode. But just want to address this perspective that wherever you are right now, you can always make a choice. You always have choices. Some people say, I don't have any choices. Yeah, you have choices, but you're not ready to face the consequences. Let's be real here. We always have choice. The question is, are you ready for the consequences of that choice? Are you ready to move on? Are you ready to experience something different? In psychology, we have this saying that you will not change until status quo is uncomfortable, more uncomfortable than changing. Just think about this for a moment. Most of us will not change until it is so uncomfortable, even painful, that we see no other way than changing. But what if there was another way? What if we could change before it gets that uncomfortable? What if one day we had that capacity to make choices before it gets into the suffering, basically? And that's what I've learned then. Once this happened, everything started to make sense. Before I left my job, we were looking for a house for a year and a half, couldn't find a house. We were getting so frustrated with the process that we stopped looking for a house. Then to realize we were never meant to buy a house in Maine. We were never meant to live in Portland. Once we stop resisting the change, once we start understanding that everything happens for a reason, it becomes a little bit easier to make those choices to move through. Today's episode was really about that. It's about becoming. But before you get there, you need to start being conscious of how you experience life at this moment. A lot of things were going against me. And not to say that I was really happy in that job for years. I worked there for almost 3 years. And I was really happy and I was doing a great job. And sometimes we do such a great job that people wants to keep us, but it doesn't mean that we're happy in what we do. And it started becoming really clear to me that I was no longer welcome in that job when I started to have things that are pushing me out. For example, people were not inviting me to meetings or forgetting to work with me or went around me to do things. When you start experiencing things like that in your job, where you start feeling that you're not being welcome anymore, it's the universe way of telling you, yeah, it's time for you to leave. To a point that when I left, they didn't even have any event for me. I worked there for 2 years and a half, and there was no big celebration of, hey, good luck. And I, if I recall accurately, actually organized my own thing. I can't remember. It doesn't matter, and it didn't matter then. But for me, it was just a sign that, yeah, it was time for me to leave. They can't even recognize what I've contributed. And of course, I left and they asked me to do some contracts for them. I did one, but then I stopped because I didn't want to maintain that connection. So I'm inviting you right now to reflect on your life and try to be really honest with yourself. And one of the way you can do that is just by thinking of how you feel about work. next episode, I'm going to have an expert here with me to discuss this transition, this ability to move out of your current position or to transition to something that is more in alignment with yourself. Her name is Karen Wright. She is an amazing friend and also an amazing coach. She has assisted people in transitioning, just like you might be thinking of doing for a long time. And I want to converse with her about that because she had that experience, I had that experience, and I think it could be greatly beneficial for a lot of you. One of the things she often do in her practice is ask people like, if money was not an issue, what would you do? What decision would you make? And often that put things in perspective. For me, I can truly say today that if I had all the money in the world, I would actually still do what I do. I really enjoy what I do. I really enjoy who have become. And you'll get to know me more as we go through. This today is more an intro of my past, what I've done, why I'm bringing this podcast here is because I feel like there's a lot of people like me out there, and you will probably see yourself. And maybe, just maybe, I'll be able to inspire you to advance on your journey like I did. This process is not easy. This phase of recognizing that you're not in the right job, you're not in the right place, it can be difficult. But it doesn't have to be of suffering. It doesn't have to be an experience that will destroy you, destroy your life. It can be really something that is the spark that will allow you to move forward, to transition. Looking back on my life, I can say that everything happened for a reason. I can truly say that I understand why I had the adversity that I had, the challenges that I had. I definitely see the why today. I can see where I have maybe delayed some decisions, delayed some change. I can see why I delayed those changes. But sometimes when you make such a big decision, for example, leaving my first husband, selling my house, I can understand that also I could have done it before. And if, just what if, I would have done it earlier, it would have been a lot easier on me. So I think that through that contemplation, that ability to look back, to observe my choices, to observe my non-choices, I can appreciate why it's so important today to be aware, conscious of where I'm at, how I feel, and what I'm trying to create in the future. There comes a time and point in your life where you're kind of done being a certain way, but you don't have to reach that point in order to make your life better. And as a leader, this is something extremely important. I've always been a proactive leader. I've never really liked dealing with conflict, although being a counselor and therapist, it's something I'm not unfamiliar with. I will do it if I have to do it. But like anyone, it's not something comfortable. It's not fun. So, in order to prevent conflict, I would always be a proactive leader, trying to see, okay, who is challenging in my team and how can I involve that team? I'll leave you with this story. This is one of the best story that I've shared in the past to kind of frame this idea of being a proactive leader. This is at the beginning of my career. I was working for the government of New Brunswick. I was a coordinator for the wellness program. And at that time, I was working with this wellness director who a lot of people were, I wouldn't say walking on eggshells around the person, but let's just put it this way. She was somebody who was very knowledgeable, very competent, an extremely active producer in the team, very intelligent. And she had that tendency to make you feel less than nothing when you were around her and not really doing your job. And I'll give her that. It was not definitely not her intent. I know. I know that for sure. She is a wonderful person. But she had that ability to elevate the shadow in you, the aspect of you that you're insecure about. And I always felt our interaction, I would call it abrasive. And I didn't really know what to do with that. So at that time, I was still seeing a psychologist because I was just coming out of I was still diagnosed as a seasonal depression, and I was continuing to see this psychologist. And she told me, she said, well, she said, one of the best thing you could do is to create a relationship with her. And I was like, okay. And then one of my colleagues, so we were already talking about this positive psychology, competence, autonomy, and relatedness. And I've learned quickly that if you recognize people's skills, they will recognize it in you, usually. So I thought, you know what? I'm just gonna go and try to build a relationship with this person. So one night, perfect situation, we were both working in the office late. And I went in her office and I said, hey, I said, do you mind helping me with something? She's like, sure. So I told her what my issue was. And she said, well, you can do this and this and that. I said, thank you. Left it like this. And then a few days later, I went back to her office. I said, hey, thank you so much. Like, this really helped. And, I'm working on this and I want to know what you think of it. I want to know your perspective on this. And she started sharing her perspective and all that. I didn't need her opinion. I didn't need to involve her in my work. But I went with the approach that, you know what? If we want to build a relationship, one of us has to reach out. And I happen to be a lower job position than her, so she has more expertise, more knowledge, and she's a director for a reason. So I continued that way, and she is now she had become my favorite person in the office. I always loved working with her after that. Could always count on her. We create a really great relationship, and I moved up in different position there, and we worked together for a few years. And honestly, she's one of the best director I've ever had. The bottom line of that story is that no matter who is triggering you in the office, when you approach it with a different perspective, different reality, different behaviors, you can absolutely turn that relationship around. And that is the best example. If you would have told me that this director would have become the best director of my life, I would have told you that, oh my gosh, really, I don't want to meet the other directors because they're going to be horrible. I would have told you that because of the relationship I had at that time. But having worked on the relationship, having understood psychology of people, which people have the need to feel competent, to feel autonomy and relatedness. And what did I give her? I recognize her skill. I gave her the autonomy by allowing her to give me input on my work. She had the ability to provide input on my work. And the third thing is I would go see her. We would build a relationship. And we started to realize we had a lot of things in common. So when you understand those three basic needs, you can turn any relationship. Unless, of course, the other person is just not open to you. But it happens. But in general, you're capable of turning things. So this is the last story I wanted to share with you today, is that no matter where you are, what you're doing, you don't need to have a title of leader to lead your life, to lead in your organization, your work. Just take this example of me being this leader and trying to shift my relationship with my director. And that is probably why I stayed there. I think I stayed with them for about 5 years. And that's probably the longest job I have held in my career after being in my own business. So the next episode will converse with the expert and coach Karen Wright and also a friend. We will discuss about how can we transition from being in a corporate world to being with our own business, or any type of transition within our leadership life. Take care, and until next time, lead from within.